Hello, I'm Rebecca Sykes, currently a senior consultant with Carney Sando and Associates, a firm headquartered in Boston, although I work remotely from my home in Brooklyn, New York. I consult with independent schools who are looking for their next wonderful head of school. Prior to Carney, I spent 6 years as president of the Oprah Winfrey Charitable Foundation, and for the 40 years prior to that, I was affiliated with Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts. While at Andover, I did a number of different jobs, but my last 17 years, I was associate head of school. So in addition to giving the audience today an opportunity to learn more about this groundbreaking educational enterprise that is Green School, this is my chance to learn more as well. A lot has changed in the world over the last century, including our understanding of how children learn. Some schools have been able to apply that deeper understanding of what works and what doesn't. Growing up in Shreveport, Louisiana, as I did, and attending racially segregated schools, I was offered very traditional teacher-centered instruction and limited resources to make lessons come alive. In my professional career, I've had the good fortune to be affiliated with schools that have in their own ways sought to break the mold. Although founded in 1778, Phillips Academy has stayed true to its founding principles of adapting, while it goes about creating lifelong learners, people who can think critically and creatively, and who can live lives of honor and integrity. And I'm very proud to say that Phillips Academy has had a number of instances where it has collaborated with Green School Bali and plans for more collaborations in the future. The Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy was founded with a social justice mission to provide young women the education they need to change the trajectory of their lives and prospects for their communities. Also, some of the schools for which I serve as a search consultant have sought in their own way to reimagine learning for the 21st century. I'm so excited to have this opportunity to learn with you about what Green School International offers its students and families. As we connect today in the midst of this pandemic, and with the growing realization that mainstream online education needs an overhaul, Green School International offers something different. In fact, the World Economic Forum has recently called Green School a school for the future. In the course of this conversation, our panelists will give us a window into how Green School International earned such an honor. Today, we're joined by Leslie Medema, the head of learning for Green School International, Chris Edwards, CEO of Green School New Zealand, Gede Putra Vitsen, Green School Bali alumnus, Andy Wood, head of school at Green School South Africa. So let's jump in. So Leslie, I understand that among the administrators, you have the longest tenure with Green School. What motivated you to stay for so long? And can you remember back to the beginning of your time with Green School and how that wonderful journey began?
Yeah, I'll never forget how the journey with Green School began. It was November 9th, 2011. And I was in Bali and I was going to work for the first day, and it was one of those monsoon rainstorms. And I was on a motorbike in Bali living the amazing life that you can live in Bali. And I remember falling over into a rice field and being covered head to toe in mud. And I had to meet the parents that morning for a discussion about how we wanted to move away from Cambridge examinations, which is what we were teaching, and our students weren't leaving the classroom, and we didn't have the resources. We didn't even have a square building, which you need in order to conduct the tests. And so we wanted to create our own curriculum, and we wanted to work with students and with parents to actually create that curriculum. And I remember I was going to have to talk to them that morning. So that's why I'll just never forget it. And I was covered head to toe with no real opportunity for a change of clothes. So mayhem ensued. I found a change of clothes. It's become a pretty funny story at Green School. But I remember I took the job because I have a twin, and my twin is an artist, and my twin is a comedian and is a musician. And I am an academic and have gone a different path. And I remember that our experiences in school were so incredibly different, and how we were praised and for what we were praised was so different. And I wanted to really be a part of an organization and a school that was going to uplift and celebrate everybody's special and unique strengths, and then help them work on the things that were harder for them, because we're all so different. So that's a bit of my background, and it's been going on 9 years now.
That's so exciting. What a memorable way to get started.
Yeah.
So G'day, with really exciting adults in the community like Leslie, you spent your time as a student at Green School for many years, but as a graduate, now a part of the Governance Council. Congratulations, a real honor. What was the Green School experience like for you, and what do you think about now as you look back on it?
Yeah, thank you. I'm a local scholarships student at Green School. So I started in 2008 when Green School just opened. So 2 years earlier, before Ibu Leslie arrived at Green School, and I graduated in 2018. So I was there exactly 10 years, a decade. I was there. Yeah, I learned so many things. I started in Green School. I couldn't speak English at first, so I came with zero knowledge in English. I've never really interacted with the international community at that time, and my experience at Green School has opened my mind, not only interacting with international community, but at the same time learning about, because Green School focuses on sustainability, the environment, and everything you learn in the classroom, they apply practically in real life situations, and always focusing on sustainability. So that really made me learn much more than what I would be learning in other schools. So I'm really fortunate being at Green School, and all this experience being at Green School, representing the school at different conferences around the world, has made me to be in the governance council, and it's such an honor, and I'm learning a lot on strategic decisions and everything. So very, very grateful to be at Green School. Yes.
That's great. I'm assuming with this age of social media that you've kept in touch with your friends. What was the experience like for some of them?
Yeah, being Green School for 10 years, friends come and go, because it's such an international community, and the experience for my friends, it's very honoring also to see, because I'm being a Balinese, seeing the international community coming to Bali, going to Green School, because Green School also focuses a lot on the local aspects of things. So students get to learn about the real Balinese culture through Green School in an international scene. So I see them really flourishing in this educational system. So it was, for example, seeing my friends making Balinese offerings. It was really humbling seeing that, wearing Balinese attires to different ceremonies. For example, the Saraswati ceremony in Bali we have, which is the goddess of knowledge. Saraswati is the goddess of knowledge. So all the schools in Bali would have a ceremony where they respect knowledge. So, and Green School has every year this big ceremony dedicated to this, and the whole international community would wear this Balinese attire to go to Green School, and it feels honoring to me, and I bet their experience must be the same also, something different.
So I assume that you all have scattered now to different places. Where have your friends ended up?
Yeah, my friends, Green School is it makes a lot of different experience. So my friends, some of them become kiwi farmers in New Zealand, because yeah, and some of them also are out there trying to make a difference in the world. For example, I have my very good friend Malati Weisen. She and her sister founded a campaign Bye Bye Plastic Bag campaign. So their goal is to ban plastic bags in Bali. And through that, they've been very successful. They pushed the governor to ban plastic bags in Bali, which is amazing achievements. And they also interact with students from Green School. So very inspiring, very inspiring. And from there, they are talking in different forums. So Green School has this impact for the young generation, for young leaders, green leaders. And another one is also my friend Leander. He is making a company, a consultancy company, youth consultancy company called 25100, based in Greece. And it's just amazing, the Green School impact that I've seen around from my friends.
Sounds like they've gone all over the world. And Chris, I'd like to turn to you. There was a reference to New Zealand and kiwi farming. So I know that at Green School New Zealand, you're not doing kiwi farming, but you're doing some pretty amazing things. I understand that you had a very successful career as an as an educator in international schools, including in IB schools. What made you decide to leave that career to start with the Green School Network?
Yeah, thank you, Becky, and hello, everybody. I think there's an element of serendipity and there is an element of inevitability about what happened to me, because I may not have realized it, but I've actually always been on a certain trajectory. And I think the realization came late that I was always heading this way. So what you say is absolutely correct. I mean, just for the record, my parents left school at 14 and 16, respectively, in central Liverpool. And it's because of the love, the passion, the commitment, and the lack of holidays on their part that I was able to have the education I did, and because of scholarship. So I kind of walked in two worlds. My parents' world was one of very little and very standard inner city education, post-war Britain. And then I was privileged to go to a really great day school in Liverpool, through Oxford University, and then to work at some truly fine institutions, some of which actually outpotted Harry Potter. In fact, one of them was actually a filming set for Harry Potter. So you can imagine the kind of background I came through. But throughout all of that, things were happening. And I look back now and I see milestones. I look back and I see the social engagement when I was working in Sao Paulo, Brazil, as part of the IB. We were going to creches in favelas. I remember thinking, what's tokenism? What's actually going to make the world a better place? What's tick box here? I introduced the IB in a school in England, and as we've seen from recent political events in the UK, you know, the word international baccalaureate is in and of itself profoundly dangerous, tragically. So all the time I was actually, I suppose, innovating, but in a very conservative context. And then just before I came to New Zealand, I was head of college at United World College of Southeast Asia, which I'm told is the biggest international school in the world. There always seems to be something bigger in China, but I think it still is. A wonderful, wonderful school, service orientated, hugely international, over 100 pupils. And as I got to the end there, I was thinking about the efficacy and the relevance of examinations. I was looking at the problems facing the world. And I was thinking UWC, which I will always hold very dear, by the way, is a post-Cold War organization addressing issues that are live. But Green School, when I encountered it, was a profoundly relevant 21st century organization staring squarely in the eye the single most important problem facing humanity at the moment. And that, coupled with research-based learning methods that we can come to that later, but which I think trump traditional methods and then some, it was compelling. And if you've ever met the owners of Green School New Zealand, if you throw them into the mix, there's a human element too. So what I got was ruthless relevance, research-driven education, and boundless joy. That's what I saw when I went to Bali for a month. You don't have to rant and be miserable and be uber pessimistic. You can actually rejoice in your youth, and you can enjoy one of the most transformative educational experiences I could possibly imagine. So that's why at 56 years old, I've downsized by a factor of 100 from my last school, and I'm living very happily in a field in Taranaki.
Well, good for you. I think so far I could also say that there's a thread of not only joy, but also passion for green school. I'm hearing that in these first three speakers. So Andy, they've teed this up for you. You're going to be up next to open a green school campus, this one in South Africa. How does that feel?
It's a really exciting opportunity. We are at the moment building our campus, planning to open our doors in January of next year. But just perhaps a little bit of my background and my story. It sounds like I went to a very similar school to Chris, one of the large rugby fields and a big chapel in the middle, and where teachers were called masters. And then spent sort of the bulk of my teaching career in that school. I then stepped out into school leadership and spent the last 10 years in international baccalaureate schools. I founded a school here in Cape Town. So this is, I'm familiar with the whole process of founding a new school, and then had the opportunity to go and head up one of those large international schools in Dubai, which Dubai is a bit like Texas, everything's sort of bigger and better and larger and taller and wider. But it was really a fantastic experience. It's a tough climate and landscape in which to live, but a really wonderful opportunity. I've spent some time then as a head of the school in the Caribbean before just wanting to return to Africa, return to South Africa, and this wonderful opportunity opened up. And I think what really motivates me is just that sense that in the streets of ancient Athens, Socrates and Plato were talking about the fact that education ought not to be utilitarian, but it ought to raise citizens who would make Athens a better city. And Socratic questioning was about really examining yourself and your motives, and how could you be a citizen that contributes towards a better future for the city. That was Athens 500 BC, but I think those questions and those answers are as relevant today as they were back then. And so we, as I said, we're building our school at the moment. We've had some real challenges this year with COVID that has set our building schedule back 2.5 months. And we had a pretty cold, wet winter, so construction programs face some delays. Our classrooms and the teaching areas will be ready to launch in January, but our hall and our administration block and those sort of areas will probably be ready sort of March or April. But all systems go. We've got all our teachers hired, and we're running a little mini green school teacher training college, and we're getting them really psyched for the new year.
That's really great. Actually, I've seen the plans and the scheme for the campus, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. I can't wait to visit. You can send me the invitation by email, Chris or Andy.
We'll send a bamboo ship to come and fetch you.
Oh, that sounds even better. My next question is actually about the network and why there are several schools. And Leslie, maybe I could ask you to start with answering this one. And that is, why more than just the wonderful school in Bali? Why a network of green schools?
Well, there's many reasons, but how it actually started was just really about 6 or 7 years ago, us realizing that we had something really special and we wanted as many children as possible to experience it. And so how do you do that? You can grow, only so much at the school site in Bali. And we wanted to be able to bring it to other parts of the world. And that really is the founders of Green School New Zealand and the founders of Green School South Africa's were members of the community at Bali. And they too really felt that way. They really wanted to bring it to their community and they wanted more children to experience it. But we also wanted to make a movement in education. We wanted to move more toward education that's really based on making sure that we're teaching, that we were honoring this time period in students' life, that it is joyful, that we are addressing, but positively, the biggest issues of our time and the biggest issues of our future, and helping equip students with the skills to deal with that, both emotional skills and actual hard skills. So it has multiple purposes, this network, but really for now, it's about connecting in community. The thing that came about at Green School that we found was something we probably just didn't anticipate, but we thought about, was how tight the community was and how strong we were when we were together and how we were all learning. It wasn't just the students who were learning, and how powerful that is and how enriching that is for a life. And so this is an opportunity to bring that community out into the world and to bring it broader and to bring together people from even more walks of life. And so that is the long-term goal. And so that is really where the network comes in, and that's obviously in its very early stages, but we now are there, and it's really exciting.
That's great. I want to drill down a little bit on the approach that you referred to. And I understand that you have something you call the real approach at Green School. Can you tell us about that and what actually goes into the real approach?
Sure, I'd love to, because this was a labor of love, was coming down to what is the core, the quintessence, as Chris always puts it, of Green School. And really it comes down to these four words. It's relational, it's about relationships. These are all research-based, research-driven. When your relationships with your teachers are strong and they know you well, when your relationships with each other are strong, you learn better. It's about the experiential learning, the hands-on learning. If you actually do it, you learn it a lot better, and that's the E of real. And then it's about being authentic, and authentic is really about understanding that you don't walk into a math class in life unless you're a professor of mathematics. You know, most people walk into situations that there's a problem to solve, and there's people and there's interactions, and so we really want it to be authentic. It would be like you're going to experience in the real world. So very integrated learning, and then it's local. The power of making a difference locally when you're young is a power that gives you confidence. It allows you to build up the self-esteem that you need to then go beyond and start tackling the bigger problems of the world. So it's about the L, it's about the local, and then coming to the global after that. So that is the real learning principles. There are pedagogical principles that guide us in what we decide to teach and how we decide to teach.
Thanks, that's great. Actually, you mentioned local and global, and I know that the school's ethos is around the local to global approach in the schools, wherever they are. And Andy, maybe you can talk about how that applies in South Africa and how it will apply to your new school.
So we have a school in a wonderful setting surrounded by wine farms at the foot of some really beautiful mountains. And that's a setting for an inspiring education. It's just a wonderful place in which to be. But we want our children to feel that they can be agents for positive change. I think there's a danger in our time of just looking at issues of climate change, economic disempowerment, and to feel, well, what can I do? I'm powerless to be able to change these things. So to be able to create educational opportunities that start with inspiring young people to be connected to the environment, to feel a sense of connection to their local community, a sense of engagement with the issues that are affecting not only the local community, but the global community, and then to be able to embark on a series of passion projects, quest projects that will enable them to be able to get involved. It might be helping with a local animal shelter, an old age home, an environmental project, a sporting project with a local soccer club, whatever. And to have a sense that they can be agents for positive change and agents for good in that community. And those passion projects are really powerful learning experiences. One of my favorite quotes is from Margaret Mead, who always says that never underestimate the power of a small group of determined people to be an agent for change. Indeed, it is the only thing that there's ever been.
That's wonderful. Leslie, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just remember a really beautiful conversation that Andy and I had when he visited Bali, and it was about the grade 2 students. And they had seen that there were all these frogs that were trapped in this man-made kind of, well. And they couldn't get out, and they really seemed like they wanted to get out. And so it was grade 2, and they decided that they were going to save these frogs, and they were going to design frog ladders. And frogs can climb ladders, it turns out. And they designed them, and they built them, and they put them in there, and these frogs all got out, and they got down to the river. And I remember it was it was for years that they were talking about how they had saved the frogs. And that level of making a difference now and being able to say that you made a difference in something so important. I just remember having so much fun talking about that when when Andy visited, and so that reminded me of that story, and it kind of plays on what Andy was saying. It's about how it's not preparing them, it is preparing them for the future, but it's also honoring the fact that they can do things regardless of how little they are now.
So, G'day, how do you think your classmates, many of whom were from other places than Bali, as you've said, benefited from the local to global approach? And maybe actually, if you could start by telling us, where were some of your classmates from outside of Bali?
Yeah, my friends are, it's hard to put a list on where they come from. Some of them are from the US, from Australia, from everywhere, Brazil, Mexico, and yeah, the whole international, like the whole continent, I think, is represented. So everywhere I go around the world, I can always call my friends and say, "Hey, I'm in Japan. I need a room," right? Like, something like that. So yeah, like it's yeah, that's the advantage in the with the international community, I think, and learning locally in a global level. I think, I mean, for me also, you start learning about the small things in life also, because going into another country, it's for my friends also, going to another country and experiencing something very different, very unique, that they've never seen before. It creates, I think it creates understanding, and it opens their mind to a whole different perception. And I think that's the biggest advantage of learning locally, starting small, learning the small things, because if you can do the small things, you can do the big things. Small things matter, and just opening up yourself into the world and making change locally from that pilot village. You pick up trash. That effect can go towards not only that village but also the whole Bali, and then spreads to the whole Indonesia and the whole world. And this is what we learn at Green School. This small things, from picking up trash, and just speaking about it, connecting with the local school, for example. And this is learning the small stuff. That's really valuable.
Thanks. Actually, you made me remember the environmental group at OLAG, where I spent 6 years. The girls there also were trying to use their attention to the environment on campus and learning about the environment on campus to figure out how they could bring that back to their communities, many of which really didn't have a whole lot of leadership around environmental issues. So thanks for reminding me of that memory. So Leslie, speaking of many wonderful things about Green School's aspirations, I'm thinking now about the mission, which states we're nurturing change makers to make our world sustainable. We were just talking about sustainability. What does that mean, and where do graduates go from Green School to be change makers?
You know, as G'day was saying, they literally have gone all over the world. We've had admissions to universities in 18 different countries with 106 of our graduates. But we prioritize pathways that are not university pathways just as much. We've had rock stars who've gone around India as one of the best guitarists. We've had individuals who have gone on to start their own NGOs, individuals who've gone on to be advocates and activists, individuals who've gone on to have families and be really important members of their community, individuals who've gone on to become artists and run art galleries. And so it's really run the gamut. We have several nurses who are entering the field this year in the midst of COVID, which I'm incredibly proud of them for that. And so it's really a kind of a wide open opportunity for students, and it gives them that opportunity. But the idea of being a change maker is both is both a very big concept, and sometimes I think that can be overwhelming. I think if you told me I needed to be a change maker in the world, I might be overwhelmed as an adult. And so it's actually about there is a responsibility we want to instill in students, that we have the responsibility to make our world a better place. And that can be in ways that are both big and small by the world standards, but they're all big. And it simply can be being very kind and being a volunteer in your community. It can be how you treat your family, how you take care of others. It can be starting NGOs. It can be becoming leaders of schools. It can be becoming teachers. But that all of these different ways of being change makers are just as valid. But if we all did that, and we all made these what we consider smaller contributions, then we wouldn't need the big organizations out there to be doing that. So really the belief in that community. And so that's really what being a change maker is that level of responsibility to leave the world a little bit better than you found it.
Thanks. So, well, that leads me to want to ask G'day another question about what he learned at Green School about being a change maker. How was that empowering to you, and what has that meant in your life?
I think Ibu Leslie explained that really well. It doesn't, like, being a change maker doesn't have to be big. It can be also small. And I always see it as always starts from the individual level. And in Green School, it focuses on the individual to be a change maker. It doesn't have to be big. It can also be small. It starts from your home. For example, you start recycling at home since going to Green School, or you start going to the news, learning about what's happening in the world with climate change. You start to be critical about the system, about the world systems, and yeah, everything starts within. And as Ibu Leslie said, the more individuals we can have that has this mindset, the sustainable mindset for the environment, and not only the environment, sustainability in everything, in life, in business, in many aspects. The more individuals we have, we won't need these NGOs, as Ibu Leslie said. And with Green School expanding like this, I think it's a really interesting and really exciting thing to have in the world.
Thanks. And I was led to think about you as a member of the Governance Council and someone who is learning about strategic planning on an institutional level. I think that also is an illustration of how you are becoming a change maker also in your alma mater. So I think that's pretty wonderful. So, here we are, Leslie. This is, we've all been talking about the pandemic and what impact that has had on us and on the work we do. So we're in this digital box. Here we are, even for this panel in a digital box. And at most we can get 6 feet, within 6 feet of people we're trying to coordinate or collaborate with. Where does Green School see itself in a world that has changed so much in the last 8 months?
Well, I think it sees itself as not liking the pandemic very much because we can't be together, and it's about community. And I think we see ourselves as valuing that aspect of the learning so much more around the world than we all ever imagined possible. That relationship with teacher, that being together. And I think, Green School, like every other school, has been taking measures to do very small pod-based learning. And has been doing the best that it can given its current situation. But we're very lucky because we learn outside all the time. And so we get to be outside and we get to have that space, and we think of the environment as our world and as our classroom. We don't have the boxed in classroom. So we're very lucky in that way. But really what it's taught us, I think, is that this type of education is very hard, maybe not possible in a world that is only that can only be done by technology. And so, that's a good lesson to learn. And luckily, I think this is going to be longer than we all hoped, but I also do think it will come to an end and we'll be together again soon.
I'm going to be very inspired by your certainty that this is going to end soon. Thank you so much. From Leslie's lips to God's ears. So, so Chris, I'm curious about your experience in New Zealand in this very unusual time. Can you share with us your perspective?
Yes, certainly, Becky. We are blessed. We were locked down. The school opened in February, and after 7 weeks, we were locked down. And I suppose if we'd had a negative mindset, that could have been the baby left out on the mountain, couldn't it, after such a short time? And the borders are closed, so people can't come into New Zealand, and most of us can't leave. But the reality is this: we were locked down for only a short period, so we were blessed. So I'm going to be, I guess, heretical in the eyes of many people and say that it is very difficult for me to equate any kind of online education meaningfully with a green school education. You use 2 senses online. You use 5 senses every second of every day at green school. And one can approximate certain elements, and I'm not speaking with the imprimatur of Green School International here. This is me on a pleasant rant. I was so thrilled to get back on campus. I was so thrilled for the face-to-face contact, the hands in the dirt. And if I can just perhaps, expand in 2 areas here. I just want to follow up one thing Leslie said when you asked about networks. One of the reasons I was so glad to get back is this is not a boutique issue, the issues facing the world today. The reason I believe we need 10,000, 100,000 green schools is precisely the opposite reason to why, I don't know if I were making a fancy perfume or selling a sports car, I'd make sure I kept supply low and the price high. This is just too important. So I want millions of children coming to green school and equivalents. And then the second thing I want to say is when we did get back after the lockdown and when we were actually on the campus and on the land, I saw something for the first time myself that I'd really only read about, because I think for a long time, claims had actually outstripped evidence regarding nature-based education. I mean, the claims have been going back thousands of years, the Polynesian Maori tradition, the Romantic tradition in Europe. I can cite endless poems advocating the value of nature as a teacher. But, when you're at Green School New Zealand and you watch the children from around the world interact with and in nature, you suddenly realize that the nature-based education holds up, and it holds up across pedagogies, it holds up across learners, it holds up across place. It is transcendental. And I can sound, I can feel myself sounding like a zealous convert here. And that's because I am. This journey at the end has sped up for me. I've had my Damascene moment. So yeah, we got through the online part, but boy, am I thrilled to be back, because what I'm seeing is research-based education working literally in the field.
Well, that's terrific. So, so we've heard from the administrators, the leaders in the school about the wonders of being outside and nature-based learning. But G'day, I want to hear from you as a student, a past student. What is it really like to study in the jungle? I mean, this wall-less thing is really wonderful, but isn't it distracting?
I liked it as a student. Green school students have a stereotype of always active and always always just engaging and always observing. For example, if you can stay in a math class and you're learning geometry and suddenly, kabam, Fibonacci sequence, or you see a leaf outside, and then and then you start analyzing the Fibonacci, the sequences in the leaf, and then you relate it to the Fibonacci you learned in class. So stuff like this, So, and distracting, I don't know, because you're learning class. It teaches you also to focus and with all these things happening, focusing on one thing. But at the same time, these things happening at the same time is also inspiration for you, for what you're learning in class. And yeah, so for me, learning outdoors, I always loved getting dirty in the mud, especially because my parents also has been active at Green School doing the mud wrestling, so the mapantigan, and I love it. I love it. And Green School for me is it's the perfect place to get out and learn. I learned how to plant seedlings, and then after I do it at school, I would go home and do it myself because I'm curious of how if I can do it myself. And then suddenly at such an early age, I learned how food grows, and I learned how hard it is to make food, and to plan and wait and be patient and stuff like this. Learning outside is very, very valuable to me as a student, and I apply it in other things in life as I grew older.
Well, we've talked about the people in the place and the people in the nature. You must have encountered a number of animals and, you know, wildlife around you. What was that like?
It's a staple food for me when yeah. No, no, you start being in harmony with nature once you're there for a while. Of course, the first time you see a snake, you scream, but you also learn that they're animals like us. They don't like to be bothered, right? If you leave them alone, they mind their own business. So as long as you don't attack them, they don't attack you. And I think also in nature it's the same. And the recent documentary on Netflix, actually, by David Attenborough, I can't really say his name, but really cool voice guy. That's why I like to remember him. Yeah, and he even says, like, if you respect nature, nature will respect you. There must be a balance between nature and us and our system. So yeah, that's how I found when I see animals. I just let them pass. I don't distract them because they won't distract me.
That's great. Thank you. So I understand you guys have a seed to table program, and maybe Leslie, you could describe for me, you know, where the food is grown, and also if I were having lunch with all of you today at Green School Bali or even Green School in New Zealand, what would my lunch look like? What would the cafeteria look like?
Well, you would come up to the cafeteria and you would get a bamboo leaf, and that would be your plate. And on that bamboo leaf, you would put locally grown rice, you would put some vegetables that come from our garden, and you would put a big green salad on there as well that comes from our garden. So about 30% of our food is grown at Green School. Actually more right now because of the pandemic. The campus has just exploded with growth. And so much more space for planting. And so you would be eating about at least 30% of your food from locally grown, a lot of it grown by the children and grown by farmers that we collaborate with and gardeners that we collaborate with at the school. And then when you're finished, you would take that and you would bring it over and you would clear your plate into a bowl that goes to the pigs that are on campus. And you would clear your tray, your plate, and that would be composted. So it's a complete cycle of food to table to back to food for other creatures or for the land. So it would be magical for you. Most people are really surprised by it at first when they come and they see that we're eating that way, and that we all take care of our own food and eat what's grown. So and the Seed to Table program really starts at the youngest of ages with students planting seeds. And it's really, we wanted every student to grow something from a seed and eat it. It started with a conversation like that. Just the power of knowing where your food comes from and the power of growing is again about building your confidence and building your understanding of the world that you live in. So that's a really important part of the learning process.
So G'day, you talked about how wonderful it is to be outdoors, and Leslie has just painted this wonderful picture for me of what it's like to eat a meal at Green School. So did you have a sense as a student of the importance that the school placed on your well-being? Was that something you were even aware of?
At first, as a primary student, no, because I'm a kid. I was having fun. I was planting seeds. But then as you grow older, you start to realize that, wow, it's hard. Food takes some time to grow, right? And then two, also, you have to be really mindful about what you eat, like, because what you eat is what you put inside your body to be able to be productive and everything. So yeah, I realized that as I grew older, not when I was a kid, but as I grew older, I realized that because again, I always start small, individuals, right? And that's also comes with that's also what you eat, and that's what I learned from Green School when it comes to eating well and being aware about where your food comes from, and being aware of all that.
Actually, it also occurs to me as you are all talking about this, you're developing in the students an awareness of the process and also developing patience, which is hard for human beings. And, you know, we all hear about it constantly, this need for immediate gratification and immediate responses to anything we put out in the world. And so I love the idea of something that is actually more of a step-by-step process. So actually we've talked about, oh yeah, good day, go ahead.
Yeah, following up with that, like as a Green School student going at I'm studying at a business school now at IE University, Business Instituto de Empresa, which basically means business school in Spanish. And yeah, I go to a business school with students coming from also around the world, but they've never had this background like exactly what I had at Green School. So and every time I tell this experience, I often like to, when I present I don't know, a business plan, I put an analogy or metaphorically have nature really ingrained and the environment and not only profit, not only, you know, so the traditional business that you have in business school. And everyone is just looking at me like, whoa, what? like very weirdly, right? So this, yeah, it makes you different, but at the same time, you're teaching others.
Exactly, I think that's really great. Yes, Chris, I was actually just going to ask you about the food experience on your campus, but feel free to bring up other issues as well.
No, that's exactly what I was going to talk about. I was going to try and link, Becky, the Fibonacci sequence with patience in a world of immediate gratification, except it wasn't Fibonacci because we were talking about 5- and 6-year-olds at Green School New Zealand. So I wanted just to give you a story, an example that ties some of these things together. And it was to do with year 1 and year 2 in the New Zealand system, so very young children. And I saw them out one day with their trundle wheels, and it looked like a maths lesson. One was trundling, and the other one was walking beside them, writing something down. And then, in fact, they were measuring a plot. And what they'd been asked to do was devise a plot, work out how many pumpkins you could plant in that pot, having read about the space a pumpkin needs. And then I'd go in the learning space and I'd see multiplication and division lessons and pictures of pumpkins and models of pumpkins. Then they'd be back outside again and they'd plant the pumpkins and so forth. And I realized the mission was, can you actually provide food for a week for the class and for the teachers in the school? We're a very small school at the moment. And the children were out there doing their multiplication, doing their mathematics, getting their hands in the soil, doing their biology, such as 5- and 6-year-olds do. And to watch them watch the pumpkins grow, and then to watch, and I'm going to use the word ecstasy, when they actually made pumpkin soup from their own pumpkins from their maths lesson. I thought that was the neatest encapsulation of Green School I'd seen in our brief existence. So I simply wanted to throw that in as a tiny person's version of G'day's experience, I suppose, but something that really happened on campus, and for me is a summation of what Green School is about.
So what is the food scene like more broadly at your New Zealand campus? Because that sounds great. I would love to, you're making me taste that pumpkin soup.
Yeah, so in our newness at the moment, I think we're about 2 things. One is about patience and learning and thinking about where food comes from, and the other is about community and connection around food. So we intend to come 100% self-sufficient. I'm not sure I'll be eating the crickets that I enjoyed when I was in Bali. I won't put a timescale on that, but we already have a tropical house, outdoor planting. I was watching the young learners planting potatoes, for example, recently. And we're just on the stage now. It's very exciting. We had a meeting only yesterday about this. We'll be giving out our first boxes free to the community of our own produce grown by the learners. So this is quite a milestone for a young green school. And then we'll develop to honesty boxes, and then we'll develop to a market garden environment here, where Green School will be able to provide food grown by the learners for the community. And one of the things I'd like to see, Becky, as part of our diploma program, excuse me, which isn't up and running yet because we'll only have students of that age next year. But one of the things I'd like to see is give every learner a small plot of land on our very expansive and beautiful campus, and make sure that over your last 3 years, you leave that land in better condition than you found it. What have you actually done with it? And for me, that's every bit as important as getting fancy grades in any academic subject in today's world. Do you have the patience? Do you have the determination and the grit to actually go out? Because we have bad weather in New Zealand. It isn't quite paradise every day. To go out and tend. So to sum up, yeah, it's about community and it's about patience. Maybe I should also throw in the hard work as well. Physical labor is an important part in the best way of growing food at Green School New Zealand. We expect it from everybody.
Thanks so much for that. I was going to ask you guys how much of this was a secondary benefit or gain, and how intentional was it? And I think you've already told me that it was quite intentional. It sounds perfectly knit into the ethos and the mission of the school itself, and in its name, a green school, after all. So actually, Chris, you also gave the perfect segue to the next thing I'm wanting to ask about, and that is sort of the academic program and how that's perceived by families. And Andy, I want to ask you, because I know you must have been perfecting your elevator speech to respond to parents' apprehensions about the type of learning system and philosophy that Green School has, where a lot of parents, and I've experienced it in South Africa, are very focused on grades, numbers, and outcomes. So what do you say when people want to know why Green School in this environment?
I would say that every school has knowledge, concepts, and skills that we teach. It's how we teach it that is different, and how we assess it that is different. So perhaps think of a first-year medical student just sitting learning the names of hundreds, thousands of little bits of the human anatomy. And their success will be measured by just how many thousands of bits of information they can recall meticulously to get through those examinations. What gets that person to be a good doctor is their ability to diagnose the patient. And I want to say that at Green School, we're operating at that kind of level. Can you apply your knowledge? Can you apply it to different situations? Can you synthesize? And so, yes, you would need to know your basics of color theory in art, notational theory in music, multiplication tables in mathematics, but can you use those to paint great paintings, to compose a great piece of music, or to use your mathematical skills to analyze data to see where trends are going? So at Green School, we've not only mastered the basics, but we're able to synthesize, analyze, and be creative above and beyond. Now, how do you measure that? So often in our assessment procedures, we measure the easy stuff. Think of the map of South Africa. There are 20 rivers on the map. Can you remember the name of 20 rivers? Yes, 20 out of 20, full marks for geography. Well, that's a particular skill. But how does water impact upon agriculture and the livelihoods of people? And what about water security and the effects of drought and so on? Now, that's less measurable, but far more important and useful and applicable. So we're looking at really 21st century learning skills, which is that ability to collaborate, to think in systems. And just to repeat what I was saying before, we're building on a long-standing tradition of Western educational thought. We like to think that what we're doing at Green School is very innovative, and it is, but it is drawing on a very solid tradition of Socratic questioning.
Thanks so much, Andy. I think I might be wooed by that argument as a prospective parent. Good job. Chris, you've been also working as head of curriculum for Green School. And I wonder what you've experienced in your time with the program, whether parents are saying, oh, this curriculum is too open or it's too student-led. Do you ever hear that? And if so, what do you say to that?
I think, Becky, given our size, most of our parents are self-selecting at the moment. So most of our parents have thought long and hard about Green School New Zealand before they come. So one has to be a little cautious. I can't pretend for a second that the entire world would look at Green School New Zealand and say, oh yes, that's absolutely for me. But I think what I am discovering increasingly is this. And if people will indulge me for 30 seconds, I've done quite a bit of research recently into the history of examinations, because people talk about examinations and high-stake testing as if they've been around for hundreds, thousands of years in the West. And examinations were imported from China, who were using them admittedly for 2,000 years, the Chinese civil service, by Jesuit priests in the 17th century. Would you believe the first recorded examination as we would understand it in Europe took place in 1702? That's what kind of a bore I've become. The first standard assessment test took place in 1850. It's a real post-industrial revolution thing. So first of all, examinations have not been around for a long time, certainly in this tradition. And what I've discovered, I took a Maori politician around Green School, New Zealand, a gentleman who had a lot of influence locally. And I explained what we were doing: multi-age teaching, no lockstep teaching. We don't have every 9-year-old learning exactly the same thing as every other 9-year-old at exactly the same time. And if you pass the test, you're a clever 9-year-old. And if you don't pass the test, you're not. Instead, of course, we have the multi-age. We have an expansive curriculum, which Leslie, to some extent, has described. After I toured Green School, this gentleman, who was a very powerfully built man, and for me it made the story rather more moving. I suspect he'd been a superb rugby player in his day. He had a tear in his eye, and he said, "What you're doing chimes so congruently with Maori tradition. Can you imagine if we'd all gone hunting a few hundred years ago, but we'd only taken 9-year-olds because it was the 9-year-old hunting day, and they all had to throw the spear in exactly the same way?" And I was explaining to him how this curriculum captures all those people who would have been lost when I was at school. When I was at school, what about the entrepreneurial thinker who wasn't very good at exams? Gone, lost. They'd have failed. I happened to be good at exams. I got lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. So as long as the parents come with a growth and open mindset, I think they can be persuaded. And I keep saying it, they're persuaded through research. We're not making this stuff up. We can look back to the Maori tradition, or you can look at Harvard and Oxford University and read what people are actually saying. And my final point here is, of course, so many billions of dollars are invested in the status quo. Nobody's going to pretend this is easy. There are people all over the world setting examinations and marking examinations and entry procedures that rely entirely upon examinations. Over the decades, I think it has to be dismantled, and in its own small way, I think Green School has started that process. And then perhaps the final point from me, because it's something I feel passionately about, we have joined something called the Mastery Transcript Consortium, which is a bit of a mouthful, but essentially is a digital curation and a university transcript of your learning journey. So rather than simply say, you have scored 40% in quadratic equations, you actually chart a 3-year learning journey, much of which will be academic in the traditional sense, but will also involve transferable skills, actually your emotional and empathetic abilities, your entrepreneurial skills, your ability to change people's minds. And I'm so excited about that. And that is structured and formal, and it is there for all to see. There's nothing airy-fairy about this. It's just profoundly different, and in many ways actually harking back as much as it looks forward.
That's terrific. And that was a wonderful description of the Mastery Transcript in a context that I've rarely heard it described. G'day, you were going to make a point.
Yeah, Chris Edwards. I was actually I spent 1 year in an IB school when I was in Denmark. The IB curriculum is great. I loved it. I learned many things there, and I see many people flourishing there. But I personally myself think of myself as an entrepreneurial thinking, and that 1 year when I was in Denmark doing IB, I felt like it was hard for me. That was the reason why I came back to Green School, and everything you just said there really reflected on my experience also at Green School and in an IB school that you have so much experience beforehand, and yeah, because every student is different. Like I realized that with my peers also, every student learns different ways, and Green School has this approach where you learn you learn how it's comfortable for you, so not everyone learn as a homogenic way, so yeah, I agree with you, Chris. Yeah,
that's terrific. And so now you've also given us another window into your local to global experience. You've mentioned you are from Bali originally. You have studied in Denmark, and you're currently in Madrid. So another way that you are living the Green School motto. Yes, Leslie.
This conversation has also made me reflect, and Bali, Green School Bali made me reflect on my ancestors too, who were all educated in one-room schoolhouses on the prairie. And so, and basically all the education was done by one teacher for every age group of students. And so the students had to participate in teaching each other, and they had to make sure that they were teachers and they were also learners, and they went all the way through. And, you know, I know a lot of individuals who were educated in this way, who are very amazing community members, very successful, however you want to define that, but really just incredibly kind and caring people for their community. And I've reflected on that, and though, you know, we're not that small, there is that aura about it of we teach each other and we're all here to learn. And that's been really something that has come to me, and I feel like we've missed a little bit in how big everything always has to get. Is that sort of that group, and that students can teach each other as well, and that it doesn't have to be in these age groups for you to learn.
That's great. Thank you. I think the five of us could probably get together and write the global compendium of experiences of the 20th and 21st century, of people who have grown up and experienced life in many different parts of this globe. So I'll be in touch with all of you after this. But I think actually, you know, coming down to earth, there are those families who are concerned about and might be curious about the college admission scene. G'day has talked about where he's studying. He's given us some examples of where his classmates have gone, and I think you referred to it earlier as well, Leslie. But what is the college path, and what does it look like for alumni of Green School?
It looks different. Like every child is different. It looks different for every child. So there are multiple pathways to university. It does depend on the country that they're applying to, and then of course the institution within that country. But what it first starts with is really good counseling and care around what are the options out there that are good for you. It doesn't start with we all need to go to Harvard by any stretch of the imagination. It starts with where are you going to thrive? Why do you want to go to university? Making sure your why is really powerful, and then making sure we find a university that's a good fit for the student. And in those cases, when you look at it that way, finding your next journey in life that's a good fit for you, they know it too. And they come back and they select our students, and we've had very high success rate at getting our students into university. That doesn't mean that it's all universities are open to this kind of education. They're not. We're part of the vanguard of trying to get them to open up and to understand that. Some of those pathways are portfolio based. Some of those pathways are examination based, because our students will sit the SAT examination. Some have set their A-levels if they want to. This is just not what we require them to, and we certainly don't put an emphasis on it from a standpoint of these are good students and these are not good students. But we do help support them if that's the pathway that they choose to university. Our students have gotten into universities all over the world, including an Ivy League university in the United States, to universities in Australia, to universities in the UK, which those two countries tend to be more challenging, more difficult, but those pathways are there. But we do have to individualize that process and take care with those admissions. But it's gotten easier and easier every year since we've gotten accreditation, and since the world has gotten to know a lot more about our students. And we have people like G'day out there, you know, his university will be knocking down our door next year wanting, five more G'days. So that's really how we've made those pathways open up.
Thanks. That's great. Yeah, I would imagine that you've got, how many students have graduated so far from Green School Bali?
106.
So you have 106 really good ambassadors for Green School
Yeah.
out there in various parts of the world.
Yeah.
So shifting gears a little bit, I'm really curious about, what a typical day in the life of a student and also maybe a little bit of what it's like for a teacher or a leader in Green School. And I don't know who wants to take this first. What's a typical day like for a student at Green School? Maybe start with G'day.
Oh, we do a lot of stuff at school. This is hard. Typical day at Green School, you come to school and you hear the cicadas kind of singing, because in Green School it really feels in Green School Bali it feels like you're really entering into another world when you come to Green School, and then you get meet into this whole big bamboo architecture around in Green School Bali, and then you go throughout the day with your studies, and you still very always hearing all the nature around you, and you might plant some stuff every week. You're always planting stuff, at least one seed. Yeah. And once in a while, like me and my friends, personally my group of friends, when I was at school, we like to go to the river, and we, like, after school sometimes we just get to the river and cool off because Bali is really hot. And yeah, it's very different every day, but it's always exciting, I can tell you that.
That's great. Chris, maybe you could tell us what a day in the life of during sort of normal-ish times, day in the life of a student in New Zealand.
Yeah, look, I'll answer that. Give me 20 seconds to tell you how my day began yesterday. I got to school first, so I have to unlock the various chains and gates. As I got in, there was an eagle sat on the little hut at the entrance as I undid the first chain. The eagle watched me do it. And then I walked to the next gate, and there was a kingfisher staring right at me. This amazing, translucent, shimmering blue. And he actually stayed on the gate as I opened it. It was extraordinary. And then as I walked into the campus, and it reveals itself like a sort of magic kingdom, you have to go down a pathway, and then there it is all before you. And there were a pair of paradise shell ducks who stay together for life. And they looked at me and they slowly walked away. And that was my greeting on the way into the school. And after 5 years in Singapore, which I'm very grateful for and loved, I wondered, is there a more antithetical experience in the developed world than Green School New Zealand and Orchard Road, Singapore, which is where I finished my time? I would agree with G'day. No 2 days look the same. And one of the reasons for that is the element of co-creation and passion project. So, an individual might go a different way with their teacher than the person they're sitting next to or outside with. So it's very difficult to say exactly what each individual will do on any given day, but the curriculum is split into 4 areas in Green School New Zealand, and we do say it very quietly. We don't use the word. We do have a timetable, so everybody actually is following a pretty, I'm going to use the word rigid because there it is written out. It's a rigid structure, but within that structure there is so much flexibility. So you will either be doing a learning journey called Avoid, that's a 10-week learning journey program, out of which for most of the discrete disciplines, perhaps you and I would have learned as separate subjects at school. Or number 2, you'll be doing one of the proficiencies, and they're the 3 areas that most people would recognize as traditional lessons, which is literacy, numeracy, and in our case, Te Reo Māori, the Maori language, and also the Maori worldview. You will be number 3 going on a hikoi. A hikoi is essentially an experience off campus, which may involve community as well. So it's more than just outdoor education. It's about engagement, and it's about the world beyond the school. Excuse me. And then the 4th part will be well-being. And because we had the great privilege of starting this school anew, and it grew out of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and Leslie and I sat together with 2 other great people only a year ago now, believe it or not, to create this, we could put well-being not as a bolt-on, which sadly is what most people have to do these days. You know, where does it sit? What is it? PE? Is it psychology? I don't know. What's well-being? Well, for us, it's right at the core of what we do. It's one of the 4 pillars of the curriculum. So they're the 4 areas with which a learner would be engaged at Green School in that timetable. But what that is for each individual might look quite different depending on their age and the nature of their co-creation with their teacher.
That sounds wonderful. And we won't tell a soul about the timetable. Shh. All right. Andy, are you envisioning something quite different for South Africa, or will you be taking inspiration from Bali and New Zealand? You're muted, Andy.
At the heart of that is I've had the opportunity to visit both Green School Bali and Green School New Zealand, and to be able to say, well, how do we contextualize that to our local situation? So we very much love the idea of having the proficiencies, you know, and there'll be language and mathematics and science and so on there, a thematic approach and an experiential approach, but we're going to contextualize that to our local situation. It's been wonderful to see how New Zealand have gone about looking at what essentially is Bali and how can it be transferred to the New Zealand context. They've done a fantastic amount of work, just looking at the real principles again, adapting their curriculum. They're doing a lot of work investigating a grade 12 diploma. Chris has referred to the Mastery Transcript Consortium. And so we're learning from their pioneering journey. Those of you perhaps who are neither New Zealand nor South Africa might know there's a very strong rugby rivalry between the 2 countries. And we're toughest of rivals and best of friends. And so we hold New Zealand in high regard. But it's been wonderful to partner with Leslie and Chris and their teams and to see the work that they have been doing. And we look forward to continuing with that. Leslie is in fact halfway on a journey from South Dakota through Istanbul to Cape Town, and will be landing here tomorrow lunchtime, and will be with us for the next 7 weeks to continue that process.
Wow, that's really great. I'm jealous. So Leslie, now you've already told us about your first day, which I assume is not typical. What's a typical day like for you?
Well, a typical day for me does have a wardrobe malfunction. That's true. But a typical day, you know, you walk into campus, as Good Day so beautifully described, and you walk up to our communal area and you get a coffee that's locally grown and locally roasted, and you stand there and you chat with some of the parents and you chat with some of the other teachers. And then you make your way over to your little hut, and it really was a hut, and find that some little critter got into your school transcripts from the night before. So you have to go make sure that you reprint those and get them signed. And then a little person walks in with their bug that's bigger than my hand, beetle named George, and it's injured, and they want you to take care of it while they go on vacation. And then you hold a meeting with a parent, and then you hold a meeting with the teacher, and in the middle of that meeting, the sounds of the Balinese gamelan overwhelm and drown you out because the music is right next to where I would have my meetings. And so then you engage in that, and then you go and you observe a classroom, and you see that grade 3 has decided to take care of chickens, and they've decided to fundraise for those chickens. And then they'll sell the eggs later, but they've gone to get a loan at a bank, and we've used mathematics, and we've used exponents to teach them about interest rates and getting loans at the bank. And now they have their chickens, and they're making a chicken coop for their chickens with the art teacher, and taking care of their chickens and learning about well-being and nutrition for chickens and nutrition for themselves. So just integrating that whole experience with their curriculum, and then they'll sell the eggs down the line. And so you go observe that lesson, and then you might give a tour of campus, and then you have 2 or 3 more coffees, and then you have a beautiful lunch, and the day continues. It continues like that in a beautiful way. I really miss it. I miss it terribly, actually, because I just didn't realize how amazing it was. I spent 8 years of my life outside 20 hours a day, if not more. And that joy, it can't be equaled, you know, in the working world, in the working life. So yeah, so that's a typical day in the life of the head of Green School Bali. It's definitely not that easy. It was, you know, challenges every day, because it is a very, you know, the outdoor elements can be very challenging, but it was absolutely incredible.
It sounds really glorious. So my next question, my penultimate question for you all is, if I am a parent and I am looking for a school for my child or my grandchild, what would be the single most important or compelling reason for me to choose Green School? And everybody can take a crack at that. Chris.
Well, perhaps if I go first, and I'm going to answer with a question, because what I'm saying to parents is this: what does happiness mean to you? What does success mean to you? And what does living a good life mean to you? And if you are recalibrating those answers, not just because of the pandemic, but because of a whole host of other reasons facing us in the 21st century, not least of which, as I said, is that this tsunami coming towards us, because I watched the David Attenborough program, and I've just written about it. I thought it was the most succinct and engaging explanation of an imminent extinction event that will occur unless we stop the extractive nature of capitalism that we're currently exploiting. They're the questions I ask the parents. And if a parent turns around to me and says, yeah, it's all okay, but actually, I just want Green School as a fashion accessory, like a Gucci handbag. A couple of years at Green School will sound really good when I get back to Manhattan or London, then I lose all interest. It's a much more profound experience than that. And it is about recalibrating those things: success, happiness, and living a good, fulfilled, meaningful life.
Thanks, Chris. That was great. Andy.
I would echo what Chris is saying and really say that the world is changing, and the world into which our children are going to step in 2030, 2040 and beyond will be significantly different. And they're going to need the ability to be creative, to be entrepreneurial, to be able to collaborate. Those soft skills will enable them to succeed in the world of the future. We are all very proud of the educations that we had, and they've got us here, but they're not going to get us into the future. And Green School is education for success in the future. Don't prepare your child to succeed in 1975, because they won't ever be there.
That's great. This is not Back to the Future. That's great. G'day. Would you give me a reason why I should send my grandchildren?
As a student, I had so much fun being at Green School. As a primary, middle school, kindergarten, you're experiencing what you're like that you'll never experience in other places. You're very hands-on learning. As a high school student, if Green School, I think as a student, I found my passions there, and if you haven't yet found your passions, going to Green School will gives you a space where you can develop those passions and become leaders, and of course going to any way you like. You don't have to go to university. You can take experiential learning. You can join an NGO and intern, in a student point of view. Go to Green School if you want to discover yourself and learn and be critical about the world and save the environment.
That sounds great. Yes, Leslie.
And I always say to people that learning should be joyful. because it naturally is. We're born that way. You know, a baby, when it learns something new, it smiles and giggles in delight. And we should always have that feeling when we're learning something new, even if it's a little bit scary, or even if it's challenging for us. And so that's our goal, always with this type of education, this type of learning, is that it's joyful, and that it retains that level of passion for students, for children, that they have, that they're actually born with. And so we're always trying to achieve that for them and for ourselves.
Terrific. And my last question, and maybe Leslie, you could take this one. My understanding is, this is my last question before the lightning round. But my question is about a residential program. Am I right that that there is no residential program for Green School at this point?
That's true. Currently, there is not a residential program for Green School. We did have one when we opened in the past, but we really realized the experience is so family-oriented, and it's so community-based and community-oriented, that it actually was just much more powerful and much more important and much more in our mission to bring families together on this journey as a community of learners, making our world sustainable. So that's where we are at this particular point in time.
I think it was Chris who mentioned 1,000 green schools. And so it sounds as if I'm going to need to wait until Green School Brooklyn is founded. And just to, you know, I am patient, but I just want you to know my grandsons are 3 and 6. So the clock is ticking. And I would be very happy to be involved in the grandparent division. So just plant that little seed. My lightning round question for the 4 of you is about your favorite Green School moment. So if you could share with us, each of you, your favorite Green School moment. You guys have all given us experiences that you've had and examples of things that have been terrific, but your most favorite. Andy, did you want to start? Go ahead.
So I was visiting Green School Bali, and Chris and I were strolling around the campus together, and we went into the kitchen. And the students there were doing a project on how could insects become a food source. And they had gathered crickets and dehydrated crickets, and had made them into all sorts of different food types. And there was a bowl of raw dried crickets. And a student came over and said, "Would you like to taste one?" Now, I climb 1,000-foot high rock walls. I face lions in Africa every day, but there's no way I could put a cricket in my mouth. And Chris, a pale-faced English person who's frightened of hedgehogs, reached in, grabbed that cricket, put it in his mouth, and said that was delicious.
That is great. For another time, I'd love to know how you distinguish between a raw cricket and a cooked cricket, but we don't have time for that today. So that's a great story.
I think these were sun-dried.
Oh, sun-dried, okay. Chris.
I'd like to talk about very briefly just our opening ceremony. We had the local Maori tribes. We have the local called the Hapu, and the wider tribe, the Iwi, come, and they conducted something called a porphyry, which is a Maori welcoming ceremony. It's very ritualistic. I won't go into the details. But of course, being a Maori ceremony, there was the most beautiful singing. I can't describe it. And there was a procession from outside the learning space to inside the only learning space we'd built at that point. And in that group, you had people who'd made a great success of their lives in Silicon Valley, people who'd worked in skyscrapers in Tokyo, people who'd worked in businesses in Sao Paulo, you can imagine. And there we had people in Maori tribal dress welcoming people to the New Zealand community. The music, the singing was just transcendental. And I'm not easily moved. You know, I'm one of those people who actually finds art far more moving than real life most of the time, or the arts. But I have to say, even I felt the lump in my throat as Green School New Zealand opened, that coming together of cultures, of worldviews, and going back to what I said before, on the parts of those, if you like, developed Western mentalities, that recalibration of what a good, purposeful life is going to mean in the future. So that will be my highlight.
That's beautiful. Good day.
It's I'm thinking so hard right now because as a student, I've been like, I was always every day so excited to go to school. And that's really rare to say for a student. Like, you're excited to go to school every day, every morning. Like you wake up, you just want to go to school. And yeah, it's so hard as a student to find like what your memorable moment is. But I think for me, I guess if I had to choose one, is the graduation ceremony in Bali. The Green School graduation ceremony is very, very holistic. The whole community is there with you, supporting you. I was lucky enough to be valedictorian, so I was giving a speech, and it was nice, and it was sad and happy at the same time, because first of all, you're leaving green school, and you're leaving high school, and you're leaving your friends, and it's really sad, but also happy because you get to tell more people about your experience at green school. So, and also our guest speakers at graduation assemblies we attract green school attract a lot of interesting inspiring people. Like Jane Goodall was once at green school as a graduation speaker, and graduation is very lively, and so yeah, that's my memorable moment at green school.
That's great. And congratulations on being valedictorian. I'm not surprised at all. Leslie, to round it out.
Yeah, I was actually going to use graduation as well, but I'll use another one because I remember I cry at every graduation, and the one where Jane Goodall was there, I remember I started crying, and she came over and said, "I think you need a hug." And so in the middle of the ceremony, Jane Goodall hugged me, which is one of the most amazing moments of my life. And if you've never seen a Mampantagan ceremony that G'day and his family put on, it is the most remarkable, beautiful ceremony you'll ever participate in. It's indescribable. You have to look it up. There are no words for it. But I think my happiest moment was probably much simpler. When I was leaving green school after 8 years, a little boy came to me and he gave me a plant, and it was an avocado tree that he had grown from an avocado seed that he had eaten. And he wanted me to make sure that I had this plant, and we planted it in the garden there so that next to my office, so that I would always be there. And I just found that to be so special, that the gift that he gave me was something that he had used, and it was going full circle and would be left there. So that's my happy memory of green school, of so many.
I'm sure. Well, thank you all so much for expanding my understanding and awareness of green school. And now I think as of this moment, my favorite memory and recollection will be this conversation. But I'm sure it will be surpassed by my visits to Green School Bali, Green School New Zealand, and Green School South Africa. But thank you all very much for all that you have done to make Green School flourish. And I look forward to seeing you all when I visit. Thank you.
Becky, thanks so much.